So after I woke up today, I realized with some of my emotions, yeah, that is certainly empathy. And do you know who it is? Well, maybe, maybe not. This could be my emotions too, but I really think it was empathy. And but I want to talk about, when you have to try to find your way out of kind of a labyrinth of lies, and I could say corruption, but I'm not sure if that word is too strong. Lies, secrets, people being used to doing things a certain way, persons abusing power and getting off on it. I mean, I think about a person that has abused power for decades, and I'm not sure that there is any stopping a person that does that. I think about, there was someone that came to mind when that was going through my mind where, even after being sued after a patient died, he didn't lose his license. All right, so yeah. It is unreal. I mean, people get off on that power. It's power. It is power, and it's feelings of power. And there are persons that, I'm going to say it again, get off on it. And I mean, we used to use that phrase in a casual way that, you know, wasn't really crude, maybe not polite, but, you know, it was slang. All right, so, you know, a person that does that, you can't really tell them that. And you just have to sort of protect yourself as much as you can, and you have to protect yourself. So, I thought I would just sort of talk through personal kind of scenario, and and is this going to help anyone to think through, circumstances that they might be experiencing? As usual, the light is kind of bothering me. All right, so I think about fleeing for my life. Basically, it's just like, wow, here's what I want to say first. There are some things it's like, wow, that's real mixed up. Real mixed up. All right, so mixed up, and am I helpless? Well, I mean, what can I do and what can't I do? So there's a question, what can I do and what can I not do? And when I can't do something, what are the reasons that I can't do it? You know, just, and I think about a person power tripping again. So it is unreal. It's just unreal. Civilized. All right, so I think about fleeing for my life, fleeing at age 25. Uh, what's going through my mind is I lost some weight after that, and then I lost weight when my first husband and I separated, and I lost weight after I moved to Georgia. Grief can do that. Moving to Georgia and losing weight, that's the most weight I've lost. It was real bad. All right, so I mean, over kind of a longer time frame, looking in the mirror and being like, oh my god. I mean, I'm eating, I'm trying to take care of myself, but I have lost too much weight. Um, but I think about fleeing for my life, and what did I do after that? I was in Knoxville, and I mean, why not talk about the places? Is there harm in that? Hopefully not. I mean, could I be concerned about that? Well, I can say this about East Tennessee. East Tennessee is a ground zero. It is a ground zero for nasty. I think about going to a women's march in early 2017 and it not being safe to go to anything after that. When there was going to be something going on, a hate group saying they would be there. So, yeah, I mean, was I going to get out in that? Fuck no. All right, so But I think about fleeing for my life, and uh, what did I do when I got to Knoxville? Well, my mom asked me to proofread her dissertation, and so I did that. I briefly worked at a telemarketing place. I don't know how long, not long. One of my brothers worked there, and I was not good at that, and I just didn't. I don't think I got fired, but I didn't stay. I tried to find counseling. I tried to find a battered women's group because I had been in a battered women's going to a battered women's group in Asheville, and I didn't find one, and I found someone to go to in Maryville, and I talked about it, and I didn't feel I didn't feel like I was being heard. And the same was true in Augusta when I went to Rape Crisis. And at the battered women's group in Augusta, the woman that facilitated the group yelled at people. She didn't yell at me, but she yelled at some of the people in the group. It's like, I don't understand. I mean, but I'm not coming back. I'm not in that situation anymore. And she's yelling at people. All right, so. But I thought I was trying to be responsible. So for myself and do what I thought, all right, this is what I need to do because this is what I went through. So in Knoxville, I tried to find a battered women's group. Couldn't. I found a counselor. Went. I don't know how many times. It was just like, why am I here? Because she doesn't understand. And I mean, this is not helpful. I in Augusta, I went to Rape Crisis for about a year. Um, and it was not, she was not good. I mean, but it was something. So when she left to have a baby, well, there was some of my support that disappeared, and I have been pushed out of the house, and yeah, so crisis support that comes to mind. Crisis support. Some of us kind of have to be there as much as we can, even when we have our own emotions, even when we aren't getting the support that we need, uh, or that we should be getting. How about that? So in Knoxville, all right, proofread Ma's dissertation, tried to find a battered women's group, went to a counselor at least one time. It was not real helpful, but was trying to find a way to do what I needed to do to take care of myself. Um, Briefly worked at a telemarketing place. Took a continuing education ceramics class, at least one. I did that while I was there. And really, I think about how much I made as far as ceramic pieces. It was quite a bit of ceramic work. And there's a pot up there that a man who had, I think, worked at ORNL made. He had a career in Oak Ridge. And I was thinking about after I broke that bowl recently, should I start using that? No, I don't want to break it. I have smudge in it, so it's up there. I have a few things he made. I hope nothing's broken. That would be so horrible. Um, I think we traded. When I was doing pottery, people would trade pretty often. Um, so yeah, I did that. I spent time at the public library writing down information about graduate programs in art, MFA programs, and then sending off to MFA programs to get information about programs because I had my mind on, despite the fact I had fled, had lost weight, was terrified, and the O.J. Simpson stuff was going on around that time too. Despite all that, I was keeping my mind on the future. All right, I want to do this. All right, so well, Augusta, there's a college there, and I can apply to that, and you know, so thinking about that. All right, BA, BFA. Well, I had a BA already. To get a student loan, I had to be earning a BFA. So, and that is what I think more often a person has applying to an MFA program anyway. So, writing to the ceramics professor, do you know of apartments that, thinking about housing in Augusta and getting something back why do you want to know, basically? It's like, wow, she's a bitch already. All right, so, not saying that out loud and not probably even allowing myself to feel that, but it was just more just this, like, disappointment. It's like, she's, I mean, why do I want to know? I mean, am I being interrogated? I mean, all right, so being responsible, trying to be responsible and being responsible, getting ready to move because mom was doing her postdoc there. All right, there's a program, I'm applying to the program. And I'm looking at MFA programs and getting materials from MFA programs. I ended up with quite a stack of program catalogs, thinking about that for myself. That was my goal. All right, so in Asheville, I had just thought I didn't think he and I wouldn't be together, and and then the abuse got really really bad, and I kind of feel like it was the better I felt about myself, the worse the abuse got. I think that's possible. What kind of person does that? If we want to use DSM labels, there might be some real specific labels, but I don't tend to do that. I'm just going to say a brutal human, an insecure person. Someone insecure does that. All right, so those are some things. What else did I do? I got school records for my brothers to take to Georgia. I did things that were needed to be done that, my brothers who were in high school and middle school couldn't do. Uh, and did I complain? Of course not. That was just part of responsibility. So I did those things. I moved separately from them to Georgia because I don't know if I had some stuff. Maybe something that I had was at my dad's, but my dad and I moved him in a van from the restaurant, me with my pickup truck, and driving through North Augusta, and by Murphy's Village, and dad putting his arm out the window and making a G. When we stopped, I'm like, I knew he was making a letter. It's like, what are you doing? And he said, that's the Gypsy Kings. That was a G for the Gypsy Kings. So anyway, so we got to the house. I guess I moved in a little bit before they did. I don't remember if I was back and forth to Knoxville after that. But yeah, so then in Augusta, for me, starting in an art program, it would have been my second undergraduate degree. And I was a good student, and, yeah, and then being pushed out of the house when there was room for me in the house. And I can say, will it sound dramatic if I say my life was destroyed? I was harmed very, very badly. And no, I can't forgive that. All right, so I experienced that, after I was put through that hell, 2 years after I fled domestic violence. I gradually kind of left Augusta. I started taking classes again in the fall, but I was taking education classes. Did I want to teach? No. But I was just trying to keep going, trying to figure out what do I do? I can only wash dishes and work. I need to do something where I can support myself better. So staying with our grandparents for a few months, then going to see my dad, and then getting married to someone who worked at my stepmother's restaurant and who was basically family, and where we had been acquainted for a few years. He actually had helped move stuff from the house in Asheville when I went back to get my cat and to get, belongings, because I had left with not much. I mean, I just basically ran. All right, um, I think about this. I think about having to move from Knoxville. I ended up back in Knoxville. So I fled from Asheville in 1994. I moved back to Knoxville with John in 2014. So that was 20 years that had passed. and I worked in women's health, and yeah, I mean, I worked in women's health. Then when there was the threat, the morning I had had a nightmare with chills that I was putting John in danger with my job, and I put in my notice. I earned a second graduate degree, and yeah, was involved in community, had purpose, had friends, and then he decided to leave after I told him after he came home drunk, if he got a DUI and went to jail, someone else was gonna have to get him out. So then, I was thinking this morning about our mom saying she wanted me to not live far away. So that's partly why I moved where I moved. Yeah, and and going over 3.5 years without being in person, and the way I've been treated. I mean, can someone explain it to me? What I'm having to go through in my mind is just some of these things that feel like a clusterfuck, and where it's like, all right, you don't have control over what other people do, and I, I, what can you do? Is there anything you shouldn't do? But I was thinking about my friend Sally, who killed herself and who was in the honors college at UT. And, I was thinking about my mom's husband, and he went to UT, and I'm like, how did someone from Philadelphia end up at University of Tennessee? What was he looking for there? Was it easier to get into school there? Like, how did he end up there? And, I mean, did they end up together because UT was familiar since that's where she earned her doctorate? I don't know. I don't know. And it's strange because I think growing up, I didn't feel a real strong whatever to Tennessee, and I wouldn't have thought about going to University of Tennessee, but it's not that far from the mountains. I mean, there's that little section of 40 that part of it fell into the river, between Asheville and Tennessee, and but what all clusterfucks am I having to survive? Can anyone see that? And does this help anyone in thinking through if you are surviving clusterfuck? Does it help you think through it? Do I feel crazy? I know I'm not crazy. What I know is that there are persons abusing their power, abusing their privilege, and doing harm with no conscience, no remorse, and feeling entitled to do it. And I'm having to survive that. I mean, and I wonder what's it going to take, because I ain't fucking giving up my life. I ain't fucking giving up my life. When I think about fleeing and doing the things that I did that were healthy, did I do anything that wasn't healthy then? I mean, I didn't drink. I didn't use drugs. I mean, I was being responsible. I mean, I ain't pretty. I might have a little bit of attitude, but I tend to contain it. I was existing, having fled extreme violence that I think people still do not understand how serious it was, and that they could have ended up with a dead sibling. And perhaps they think it would have been for the better. Well, they can think that. If they think that, the reality, when something like that happens, I mean, sure, if they want to think that way. It is not good when a person dies, alright, so why anyone would feel that way, I mean, what would I say? That's misogyny. It would be an extension of the abuse that there always was growing up. I mean, where all would that come from, that attitude? I am going to say this. I don't understand what's happened. I mean, it's like, wow. It isn't real. It is not about males and females, except there's some real bad misogyny. And it seems to have become that in some way that I do not understand. I do not understand. But if people need to get on a plane and go overseas, somebody buy them plane tickets. Please. All right, so why is it that having had to move from Tennessee in late 2018, I mean, I don't know what to say. I think about I think about writing to the band that the Violent X played with, being told he wasn't playing with them anymore because of his behavior, even after they had been playing together for quite a few years. That is how bad the isolation is. That is how bad the isolation is. How do you help people understand how extreme violence was when they do not care? I mean, should I say, do they not have a frame of reference? Or do they think that I'm to blame? Or is it just, oh, tragedy happens and people die and, we just keep on. Well, again, a person might think that. But a person should think again. If that's the way a person is thinking, how is it that it is so bad, that it is so bad? Again, I think about our mom's husband being married to someone that went to University of Tennessee undergraduate, then earned a law degree, worked for his family, then went to a for-profit medical school started by a business partner of a Capone, you guys. Is that a medical school? What is that? That's a business. That's a business. And how are people trained? A school in the Highlands? I mean, wow. I mean, yesterday I was wondering what exactly, when he moved to Georgia, what all did he take advantage of as far as state infrastructure? Because there are some things that someone really needs to look at. Do I want to put my energy into that? I don't. But it's just strange to me. Again, do I feel a strong relationship to Tennessee? Well, I mean, having lived there twice and having friends there and having had purpose there, well, I mean, and thinking about seeing the river and from a few different angles, and then looking to see if something had happened and someone had driven into the river the Friday before that Sunday that I was seeing it in my mind. Well, yeah, I know I have a relationship to the land. And I mean, and I have a relationship to people. But we didn't live there when I was growing up. I lived there at age 25 for maybe a month and a half. And then, 20 years later for about 4.5 years. So, well, more than four. Was it 4.5? About 4.5. All right. So yeah. What I'm trying to do is understand why I'm treated like garbage. Why I'm treated like my life doesn't matter. And I guess I think about people on a power trip for decades and the way it's real hard to call attention to, I mean. and again, I think about I could have been killed. And I think about writing to him because the isolation is that bad. So what else going on? Again, anyone else need to hear this? Anyone else have circumstances where it's like, all right, is there something, I mean, I don't quite want to say replaying, but is there something replaying? And if something is replaying, what is replaying? If there's something that I need to do, that someone needs to do who's listening, what is it that needs to be done? And protect yourself. I mean, I just sit here like, wow. I mean, where does the hate come from? I think about youngest bro, and I think about taking care of him when he was a child. I think about being attentive to his birthday and possibly neglecting my second youngest brother's birthday, getting presents for my youngest brother, listening when he told me things and not judging. And I think about the hate towards me. that was going on before I wrote a card to his wife saying that she needed to learn some manners. And she does. All right, so she needs to learn some manners. All right, so that, of course, did not help. But the hate was already there. It's like, what's your problem? What's your problem, dude? But I do not want to be in conflict with you, but you've got some problems. I don't know what they are exactly, but you better watch it. You better watch your attitude. You better think about respect. You better think about your age and that you're 13 years younger than your sister. And that no matter what, you need to have respect. I don't know. Again, anyone else out there, kind of like, how is this possible? Because that's where I'm at. It's like, all right, I grew up. What's that? Trying to be good, trying to meet expectations. It was never good enough. And yeah, well, I am good enough. I am good enough. And anyone with the attitude that I'm not really needs to be sat down, maybe by professionals, needs to be sat down by someone or something and reminded. Maybe shown, look, sometimes a person might not be able to manage the emotions. So then what do you do? Well, I don't know. I just think about was I better off dead? Well, I'm thankful I was not killed, I suppose. I mean, but the lack of love is extreme. It is profound. And where did it come from? Again, I think about power trips, and I think about people just not knowing some things that they need to know, that they need to understand. And I think about abuse because I think about her mom getting 3 facelifts and sunspots or age spots removed, and her husband saying he'd pay for cold sculpt, whatever that is, and that's a problem. Being married to someone that wants you to change, that doesn't like the way you look, that, wants you on your knees cleaning up your shit just out of chemo, that screams at you to wipe your ass. I don't understand. A person that doesn't divorce someone like that, I mean, I have a hard time understanding that. I really do. What eventually happens? Well, I mean, I'm going to say this, when someone comes to this part of the country, insulting people, harming people, committing genocide against people who have experienced it over generations, what needs to happen? What needs to happen? Again, I'm stunned. It's like I fled for my life. I fled for my life. And I'm not going to say, I fled for my life. I'm not going to beg. I fucking fled for my life. My life matters. I fled for my life, and my life matters. Why am I being treated like I've done something wrong existing? Why am I being treated like I'm a bad person? What's the source of the hate? And what needs to happen to put an end to that hate? Because, yeah, I ain't okay with that. I ain't okay with that. And I think some people need to learn respect. I don't suppose people can learn respect for me. But if people can't learn respect for me, people need to learn respect for someone or something. So anyway, I hope this helps. If you have sort of circumstances that it's like, I can't make sense of this. And there are limits to what I can do. Where you feel trapped and it's like, what is this and what is this? And yeah, well, I was fucked over. Harm was done to me after I fled domestic violence, over 30 years ago now. 30 years ago now, I was reeling from the harm that was done to me 2 years after I fled domestic violence. 30 years ago, sometime in the range of 30 years ago is when I got my first tattoo. my never again tattoo. All right, and yeah, the past 7.5+ years. I mean, I ain't fucking giving up my life. I ain't fucking giving up my health. I hope this gives someone some encouragement and whatnot. And yeah, thank you for listening.